Happy December, happy tournament time, and welcome into Six Rotations. He's Mick Haley, I'm Daniel Gillman, and we are brought to you by SNA Sports, better equipment for a better game. Mick, wall-to-wall coverage all day Thursday, all day Friday, all day Saturday, and here we sit. We have our field of 16. The regionals are set for Thursday, December 7th. And here we are, Mick. I want you to take the floor, walk me through how your tournament viewing went, what your instant reactions were from the first few rounds, and obviously a little bit of a lack of upset-filled weekend. But we had a couple exciting five-setters on Friday night.
Well, I think the fact that we didn't have major upsets doesn't show how close some of the matches were and how hard the teams played. I really enjoyed teams like Western Michigan, for instance, pushing Louisville. I thought the A&M Texas match was really, really good, first round match. There were just a number of good teams competing to get along, and the committee did pretty good. Most of those teams went forward as planned. It's pretty interesting the way that it all broke out, but I did enjoy the matches. I thought Mizzou showed that they can play. I thought Georgia Tech held up against Florida, which I kind of thought Florida might get them out of there, and yet Georgia Tech did a good job there. Florida State did not challenge Arkansas the way I thought they might. Baylor and Kentucky, boy, Kentucky is on a run. That's a team that we need to put HOT over the top of, because they are coming and they're not going to stop until they get to the championship if they have their way. Auburn got bounced that in 3-0. That was just shocking to me. But that shows you how good the MAC is. Creighton beat Minnesota. I thought they would, but it was closer than I thought. I just don't get Minnesota. I've watched them. I thought Dayton would put up a better fight against Washington State. That didn't happen. USC came out, and Pitt seems to have this thing about not playing until the third set. I just don't understand it. The freshman needed 180 square feet, not 90 square feet. She was hitting balls in the stands and everywhere else for a while. Then all at once just took over the match. Unbelievable. So on that side of the bracket, that was pretty interesting. Penn State coming through was a surprise to me. I thought Kansas would take that one, but Kansas was missing a left side hitter. Is that right? The four they have. So that maybe is understandable. Wisconsin wins pretty easily. Marquette and Purdue, I think we thought Purdue would come out on top of that, but Marquette played hard. I thought Iowa State would give Oregon more of a push. Oregon is sneaky good. They're just a big team at the net, and they just kind of bully you in the middle. They just kind of pound it, and when you decide you're going to load up in the middle, then they go to those outsides. But Lewis on the right side I am convinced now, is the key for Oregon. She makes some of the best shots, and she's a lot like the right side for Texas. Doesn't get a lot of attention, yet always scores in critical points and is so valuable to her team. So I thought that was interesting. Texas SMU. Texas just knocked them off of the receiving line with their serving. All weekend, Texas really served well, so they advance. My wife will tell you Tennessee's as hot as Kentucky. So there's two SEC teams on the opposite side of the bracket to really watch. I thought Western Kentucky was really good, and Tennessee took them out. So that's interesting. Arizona State just rolls over BYU. So I'm kind of thinking maybe we had BYU too high all year. They just never seem to get the air back under them after the first couple of weeks of the season. And then how about Houston? They come and put Stanford right up to the fifth game. Then they decide to set every ball in front of Kip, and she gets about four stuffs. I don't understand that, but So that's the whole 64 teams. We're down to 16 now. And boy, we got some great matches coming.
Yeah, we're going to do a little bit of a rapid fire recap of the weekend, but I want to focus more towards this regional preview and a huge Thursday slate that's going to line things up, from early morning. If you're out on the West Coast, we got noon Eastern time for Creighton, Louisville, into Georgia Tech, Nebraska, and then the double barrel action starts with Washington State and Pitt, into Arkansas, Kentucky. Penn State, Wisconsin's going to be extremely incredible. Texas against Tennessee, Purdue, Oregon, and then Arizona State and Stanford. Mick, I want to jump into a few things you said there. I also want to, look ahead to what we've got in this show. I think Texas did the same thing Pitt did by not showing up once again for that first set against Texas A&M, right? It's just clockwork. And then Coach Elliott's squad came to play from the second set up until throughout the sweep over SMU. I think Oregon is not so sneakily very talented and is certainly going to put Purdue up against the wall in Madison. That's a rematch of the Sweet 16 back in the spring 2020-2021 tournament that the Boilermakers were able to beat Oregon, move on to the Elite Eight, lose to Kentucky. I love the lineup of this Louisville Pitt rematch potential if Pittsburgh gets by Washington State and Louisville gets by a Creighton team that looked so comfortable at home, Mick, just demolished Colgate, ran through Minnesota. We've got our field of 8. They call it the Great 8 for the NIVC. There are some talented teams we'll talk about at the very end, like Wichita State and Drake, Clemson. University of South Florida had a crazy reverse sweep there. And we will talk to Jared Rudiger, the director of volleyball with the NIVC, for a few minutes here at the end of this episode, just to get a lay of the land there and an idea of what the NIVC has to come and how they can grow to get more teams from those power conferences like Clemson, who are sitting in the field of 8 or the Great 8. Lastly, Mick, you mentioned the committee, and I can't go without saying this. It was really disappointing to see the Sun Belt Conference win one set out of their 13 sets total, and then to just sit there and say, well, it could have been Kansas State, or, well, there were 4 or 5 other teams that it certainly could have been. UCLA certainly had an option to get in that spot. And I'll tell you what, the Sun Belt was utterly embarrassing in those matches, Mick. And it was disappointing to see the low level of play in some of these at-large bids or some of these unique geographical BS situations, like putting UMBC in Pittsburgh as a 2-3 matchup with USC, or even in the Florida, the regional or the quadrant there, where I'm not quite sure that the Gators necessarily earned a team as low as FGCU, where it could have, or South Alabama, where they could have put a little bit more challenge in there. And then some other quadrants had some real tough tests, like TCU, Florida State was a real tough draw for that matchup there. But TCU went through in 4. I want to ask you, Mick, moving into this non-upset style that we had, right? We had no 5-setters on day 1. Western Michigan pulled off maybe the biggest of the upsets by just running right through Auburn in those 3 sets. But this does line up, we lost 3 hosts in Florida, in Kansas, in BYU. It lines up to a very, very, very exciting regional setup where we don't have an 8 seed or a 9 seed that might get blown out. I'm not sure we're going to have many sweeps here on Thursday. I think we're going to have some very exciting volleyball.
Well, it's going to be interesting. I actually have to take a little exception to what you said there about the Sun Belt, though. I watched the Sun Belt matches, and while they didn't win sets, I have to tell you, as a historian, being just a year or 2 older than you, that some of these first-round matches have not been fun. And there was only one Sun Belt match that wasn't fun to watch. I mean, the teams competed at a very high level. They competed hard. No, they didn't win sets or games, but the level of play was very good. And I don't have any problem with the team winning 3-0 or losing 3-0 if they get beat. What I don't like are errors and giving points away and not being competitive. And when I say that this is one of the best tournaments so far I've seen from top to bottom, from the way the teams are competing, that I'm not disappointed at all in the teams that got into the tournament. I've seen some of the teams you mentioned, and they're very high error at the end of the season. And I just didn't think they needed to be in the tournament. So I would just take the other side of that. Now I forgot the question you asked me.
No, just it kind of leads into talk about the high-powered matchups in the regionals. I want to go over a few of my favorite matches from the weekend. I think the best match of the weekend was Georgia Tech, Florida. There was that epic 30-28 second set. Florida was unable to get a set point. Think about that. It was 25-24, 26-25, 27-26, 28-27, 29-28. Finally, Georgia Tech at 29-28, able to win that set. And then they force a fifth. Bertolino gets an epic block at 13 all. She has 19 kills. But Mick, plain and simply, the Gators blew it. They were up 8-4 in that fifth set. Martin, when they switched sides, we had that awkwardness, right, where they switched at 8-4. Georgia Tech had a challenge with Collier, and then it stood, but they had to switch back and then switch back again. And all of that confusion led to a little momentum change. And Georgia Tech at 13 all had that huge block, finished it with the Bertolino kill, and just plain out deserved it. They balled out, and Penn State in the same vein had just an epic five-setter against Kansas. It was Kansas that forced the fifth set. Then there was an overturned challenge at 12-10. Cameron Hanna made an epic save and kill to get it 14-13, and Penn State was able to persevere. I think Penn State did get snubbed a bit, and they might have taken that as an exception, and I think Georgia Tech did too. So I think two teams that felt like they should have hosted ended up stepping up and playing really well.
Well, I thought Georgia Tech had some bad calls earlier a couple weeks ago, and I thought this was kind of payback. The gods were nice to them this time. They got some breaks for a change, because when they played Louisville before, they got what I called a momentum changing call that, and then some back and forth that I thought the official kind of lost their cool there a little bit, but. I think, and I picked Florida to win that match. So I think Georgia Tech now is even. Now they don't have to have a chip on their shoulder. They can come into this next match and really go as hard as they can go and try to win. So it'll be interesting to see.
Then we had a rematch of the second round in 2019, Purdue-Marquette. It looked like it was going to be all Boilermakers. Purdue was able to come back in the second set, take it 2-0, came back in the third set too, but Marquette took it in extra points. Marquette led 7-1 in the fourth set. Felt like we might be going to another five-setter, but Purdue went on a 6-1 run. And then Raven Colvin, who was named first team all-conference, and that rose a little bit of controversy on the internet with neither of the Nebraska middles getting that first team, especially not Murray, but then the big block by Colvin gave Purdue match point. It was a Skimmerhorn ace in her final match in Holloway, and that gave me some goosebumps. Of course, I worked there for a little bit, but Eva Hudson, 73 swings, Mick. It was a great battle. And the Boilermakers, you'll like this, 21.1 points per set led the way of all teams over the first two rounds for Purdue. And I guess you could throw Fairfield as a bit of a cupcake in there, but Marquette has a very solid defense, and the Boilermakers scored very well.
Yeah, I think Purdue is not going to go on their defense this year. They're going to go on their offense. And with both those left sides being able to swing, and now the middle's finally coming on, they have an offensive production, as you mentioned, that's very effective. That matches them up there with Stanford. Now, if they could play the defense to keep the ball in play and get a few more out of system swings for points, then they would have a chance of moving forward, maybe.
All right, let's talk about our two top teams here in Wisconsin and Nebraska. The Wisconsin-Miami match was exciting. It was a rematch of a match in September that Miami lost in 3 sets, but the Hurricanes led early. They were up 19-18, 22-21, but then there was a big block by Wisconsin. They finished off the set on that Sarah Franklin kill. They did not look back, sweeping through Miami. And then, the Badgers looked very comfortable in that second round. I think it was a situation where Wisconsin coaches and Wisconsin fans should be very proud of the way they battled, but it was still a tight match, and they're going to have Penn State, that wild rematch. Obviously, they'll have Smrek back. But on the other side of things, Mick, I think Nebraska fans on social media were getting a little worried when LIU put a jolt into them in that final set, and then it was like, all right, here we go, tied in the 20s. And then, Nebraska was able to flex pretty well against Missouri. But overall, what's been your identification of the way that these two teams that might be headed to that epic rematch have laid themselves out here?
Well, I think if things play out and Nebraska wins and Kentucky wins, you're going to see Skinner versus Cook at a whole new level. And boy, they've got their teams prepared. Nebraska has had to do this all year, so sometimes this takes its toll in the end. Kentucky is hot. What is it, 23 straight or 24 straight now? I mean, They are just mowing teams down, and they believe. So that's the one match that I would like to see. So I don't take anything away from Georgia Tech. They might catch Nebraska looking forward to Kentucky. Arkansas, it just looks like they're not going to win. They're not going to win, and yet they continue to win. So that's a team Kentucky can't overlook. They played them twice now, I believe, in conference, and won both times. So that's an interesting one for me. So that's where I like to see it. I want to try to maybe see a Kentucky-Nebraska match. That would be fun for me.
Well, Kentucky swept Arkansas 2 weeks ago, but it was a 5-setter in Lexington. And obviously this won't be in Lexington. This will be in Lincoln. And so Nebraska, Georgia Tech, I'm not sure how competitive that will be, but it is unique, Mick. And we could talk about it again. The schedule giving, the coaches the decision is my guess, right? And that's why Nebraska and Wisconsin are playing the first match in their regional. But to have Nebraska playing at 2 p.m. Eastern, right, 1 o'clock local time, middle of the day on a Thursday, as opposed to the option to playing a 3:30, a little bit darker in the night, a little bit more of a primetime matchup. I am surprised. Now, it could also be because of TV scheduling. They might have wanted Nebraska on ESPN2. Meanwhile, Arkansas, Kentucky plays on ESPNU. And the same can be said about Wisconsin, Penn State. They're at 7 o'clock Eastern on ESPN2. Meanwhile, Purdue, Oregon on ESPNU. But Mick, as a coach, would you prefer to play first in this regional or play second?
Always want to play first.
Yeah. Honestly,
I never want to wait for that other match to get over. You've got to manage the locker room. You've got to manage all of the time between the matches. You don't know if it's going 3, 4, or 5. Right. If I have a chance, I want to play first as a coach and as a team. Then I get to watch the second match and know what I'm doing, because I'm assuming I'm going to win the first match always. And so then I get to watch the second match, and it works much better. So if they have choices, we were never given choices. In fact, we were told when I was in the tournament every year, and we hosted almost every year. I was always told we had to play the second match.
And that's what Pittsburgh and Stanford have to do. They have got to play the second match.
That always bothered me, and I didn't like that, but I liked hosting, so there are trade-offs,
All right, and then a couple more exciting ones. Dayton forced that 5th set against Pepperdine. It was 12-4. Pepperdine came all the way back to 12-9, but Dayton was able to fight them off before falling in the second round. And Mick, before I want to get some predictions, we had an epic one between Houston and Stanford, right? Houston goes back against Santa Barbara, forces the 5th set against Stanford. Elia Rubin had a career-high 23 kills. But listen to this great stat I saw on X. Houston is just the 3rd team ever to force a top 4 seed to 5 sets in the opening 2 rounds since they changed the hosting rules in 2016. Now, all 3 matches were won by the host, but you go back 2017, Western Kentucky at Kentucky, 2019, Santa Barbara at Texas, and here in 2023, Houston at Stanford. Those are some, interesting stats, but also you don't win, you don't win. And as you mentioned, Kendall Kipp had those wild blocks to push it from 5-5 to 9-5. She finished with 16 kills and 6 blocks. But Mick, this brings me into prediction corner here. Do you see the 4-1 seeds moving on to the Final Four, or do you see a shakeup here this weekend?
I think there's a possible shakeup. I just don't like the way some of the teams are playing. They're pushing the panic button. They're getting to 5 sets. Like Stanford going to 5 sets. I don't see any reason for Stanford to be playing 5 sets with those teams, and yet they continually have done this the last half of the year. So I'm worried about Stanford. I was real high on Stanford, all through the season with their talent and everything. But then again, I didn't understand Minnesota not being able to perform. So that's interesting. I think Louisville is gonna have some trouble, and
you mean
whether it's Creighton or whether it's after Creighton, I think Creighton is a matchup for Louisville. They're similar teams, so it's going to be who's the gutsiest, and you've got De Beer to lead Louisville. I don't know who's going to lead Creighton. They've got those 2 left sides that are good, but I think Krause is sometimes injured, and you never know. So it'll be interesting to watch that match. I'm really, really excited about the Kentucky going through with Arkansas, and if they are able to get by Arkansas, possibly Nebraska, but then Georgia Tech may excite. So there are plenty of possibilities for upsets. The one I don't see getting upset is Wisconsin, just because of Franklin. I mean, if anybody is riding a beautiful white stallion out there, it's Wisconsin, because Franklin is the most dominant player since Plummer, I think, in just destroying the ball every time they need that sharp cross-court kill. She hardly misses on that shot. Really spreads out your defense when she can hit angle like that and still hit the back line. So, and then if you play 4 defensive players, she tips. And so, you really have to be on your game there. I do think Oregon will get by Purdue, but as you pointed out, Purdue is hot. So that's interesting. And then how about Tennessee, Texas? I haven't given Tennessee credit all year, and they are firing on all cylinders right now. I just think Texas serving is going to be the difference in that match, and Texas will move on, and they'll get another shot at Stanford. And Stanford took them out 3-0 at Texas early in the fall.
Yeah, 4 Big Ten teams, 3 SEC, 3 ACC, and 3 Pac-12. So a well-balanced, 4 Pac-12 with Washington State, Arizona State, Stanford, and Oregon. How fitting would it be to get the Pac-12 with multiple representation into the Final Four in their final year? That would be wild. I do think that I like Nebraska and Wisconsin in the top, but I'm going to go out there. I think Washington State will go 5 with Pitt. That's just a 5-setter that's built in to my memory bank from a few years ago, right? It's just one of those things that has to happen. And I'm going to go ahead. I think that both 1 seeds on the bottom of the bracket will lose. So I don't think we'll have 1 seeds that fill our Tampa weekend. I don't know whether it'll be Texas or whether it'll be Arizona State or Tennessee, but I like ASU. They looked so clean in Provo, one of the toughest places to play. And now they get to go to Maples Pavilion, which is one of the easiest places to play. Every year we see Stanford losing at home. Last season, it was San Diego in the regional finals. Who will it be this year? All I know is that that's probably the least atmosphere. It's just a bunch of 50-plus-year-old Stanford fans that sit on their seats. And I have nothing against the age, Mick. You go to Madison and you've got a bunch of 50-plus-year-old fans standing and spitting and cheering, but not in Palo Alto. So I'm just going to go ahead and throw shockwaves out there and maybe a little bit of a shot there. I still can't believe Sarah Franklin, right? Like in June, we were told that she might not ever play volleyball again. Now she's the player of the year. It's just the best story. And like you said, it reminds me of Fecky. It reminds me of Plummer. It's that kind of vibe that Wisconsin is starting to put together here. And obviously, a rematch with Penn State is going to be just a ton of fun.
It's just not at Penn State.
Exactly. And they have Anna Smrek. And so it's just one of those situations where, like, you've got Smrek back, you put Orzel back in her official position, and I just can't see them. I can't see them falling either. And Mick, here at the very end, I do want to talk a little bit about the NIVC. We've got Jared Rudiger coming on here in a minute. I know you didn't, not many people were able to watch much, but there were a couple of exciting matches. Now, there weren't many 5-setters, period, whether it was the NIVC or the NCAA tournament, but USF had a great reverse sweep over St. John's. They'll match up with Georgia Southern, who did the same against Winthrop in the first round. That's an exciting matchup down in Georgia. UTEP Clemson out in El Paso. Wyoming and Montana State both knocked out the hosts in Northern Colorado and Sac State. So that's a matchup in Laramie between a pair of teams up in that Big Sky region. And then Wichita State Drake in Wichita, where seeds held, and Drake, the runner-up last year, lost to Boston College. So that's our NIVC minute. We're going to have Jared on in a moment here. But Mick, any final thoughts here to leave our fans before we say goodbye in terms of talking NCAA tournament? Texas won their 36th straight first-round match. They're 36-0. And how about Hawaii? They've made every tournament, and they keep on showing up in the first round. They just didn't quite have enough firepower come the second rounds against Oregon.
Yeah, I think I'll point out something that goes by the wayside. We had our disagreements about Sunbelt in the NC2A tournament, but there's a 5th Sunbelt team now playing in the invitational tournament. And that's a commitment by that conference to put money into women's volleyball. And it's starting to pay off for them. The 5 teams are playing in postseason, or were playing in postseason for that conference. And that's pretty darn good. I think there are 14 schools in that conference. They get 5 playing in after the season's over. So I think that's pretty good. We didn't mention, did we, our Southeastern Louisiana, that we should have called the announcer. They were calling them the Lady Lions, and they just want to be known as the Lions, but they had their moments, but poor Hartman couldn't find the court on the right side. That was too bad, because they had their chances to stay in there for a while.
Oregon was just a little bit too tall from the get-go there. But we hope you enjoy your Thursday wall-to-wall coverage. Stay tuned for our chat with the NIVC director and Jared Rudiger coming up now. Joined now by the NIVC director, Jared Rudiger. Really appreciate the time here, and very excited to kind of get a chat about a tournament that not a lot of people maybe know the background of, or what the vision is moving forward. But first, Jared, I'd love for you to just kind of give a little bit of a background, maybe your entryway into volleyball, where you got in before joining Triple Crown Sports and having them take over the NIVC.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Daniel. Yeah, I'm excited about the NIVC. It's an exciting time of the year right now for volleyball as a whole. So I've been with Triple Crown Sports for over 12 years. Prior to that, I was in banking, doing the business corporate world, but I've coached the game at the high school and club level for over 20 some years now. A native of Northern Colorado, been at Norco Volleyball for 20 years as a coach before I said I was going to be a dad. So both of my kids play there currently, a 14 and 11-year-old. I'm a high school coach here in the area at university schools. Actually came off of a phenomenal run, state second place in the Class 3A this past season. We were the 17th seed and make a run. So it's pretty fun. Yeah. So been around the game for a long time and love the sport, and always want to grow the sport. I've been doing it since I was in my early 20s. And I love seeing what we can do and the joy that we can bring to the volleyball community through the game. So.
And there's been no doubt, right, from Georgia Tech winning it a few years ago, and then seeing the ACC continue a little bit of dominance with Boston College and now Clemson in. I'm curious, what have been the movements behind the scenes to grow this tournament and to maybe continue growing it here over the next few years?
Yeah, we have, just like our youth events, we run the NIT on our youth side, which is an invite-only youth event in Kansas City over President's Day weekend. How we grew that event was just feedback from the community of club directors and coaches that, wanted to grow the youth sport. And so we plan to do that with the college game as well. We ran the WNIT for women's basketball for 25 years before the NCAA chose to do their own thing. And we actually had helped, we probably assisted with some of the growth of that game, to start their own event in basketball. And so we have some visions on, do we do a Final Four? Do we work with the NCAA and have the NIVC within conjunction to the Final Four, as it rotates? Do we do a Final Eight? We do believe that the momentum that first and second round on some home courts bring to the game of volleyball is extremely important, just like the NCAA, their first 16 seeds are hosting, and you see record crowds and just amazing environments. We like to do that as well in the NIVC. UTEP set a 2,600, I think it was, this past weekend, in their first round win. And that's what we're trying to do for the game. So lots of different visionaries. We plan to grow it. We would like to get more Power Fives involved in it. If you did a 32 team bracket with everyone that tells us no, you got a really phenomenal 32 team NIVC with some really good volleyball. And so we hope, our hope, fingers crossed, is that as the volleyball game grows across the country with professional leagues, attendance records, that there will be a lot of people that can get their team on board and administrations on board to play past Thanksgiving, even if it's not the NCAA tournament.
And then last one for me, I'll throw it over to Mick here. I'm curious, as we see some more events and you talk about whether it be preseason for volleyball, are there movements that can be made to try to bring more awareness to some of the teams that aren't kind of being left behind, even during the regular season? But I think that's something that the NIVC really brings awareness to. Your Boston Colleges, your Drakes, these talented teams like Wichita State that pull off regular season upsets. Are there moments or are there movements with Triple Crown that are trying to either get regular season pre-conference tournaments moving or anything like that gets it more like a basketball style?
Yeah, and I'm glad that you alluded to basketball style. I think that's what, we run the Cancun Challenge for men and women's Division I basketball, an MTE event down in Cancun over Thanksgiving week, right? And we've had some phenomenal basketball teams move through that. Kentucky back in the day, this past year, James Madison won it on the men's side, which is a top 25 program. And so our company is a slow growth. We don't just put events on to put events on, right? We want to do it for the right reason and have a compelling reason to do it. And so there is a lot of discussion right now within the volleyball world space with AVCA, with Jamie Gordon and his team, our team, some ex-coaches, Tom Hilbert, ex-CSU coaches in our backyard. He's went to Cancun to see what we're able to do. Just to, to elaborate on, like, would your team play in this if you were still coaching, sort of thing? And so we are doing some things with the AVCA on some preseason tournaments that they're building, and we're kind of partnering with them, like, behind the scenes. And then we have some discussions going on about a preseason tournament, maybe down in Cancun or Puerto Vallarta, two different locations. Our softball team runs a huge softball tournament in Puerto Vallarta in February. We have Oklahoma coming in 2024, which is a defending national champs. So we feel that volleyball is a sport that we're going to do that in, but we're going to make sure it's what the coaches want, what the fans want, and then be cautious of our financial situation. But we will be doing that here in the future, and it's actually been going on for about 18 months now. But it's just a slow build. So,
go ahead, Mick.
Well, it's certainly an interesting concept. I was just playing around here with my pen, and I was thinking about your tournament, and I was thinking just these teams alone, if you added Indiana, Ohio State, UCLA, and Kansas State to this tournament, what an exciting second group of teams you would have, adding it to the group that you have right now. Have you been able to get a TV contract for the tournament?
We haven't. That's, that is, as we know, that's one of the big elements right now in our sport. And we have not. We have some internal, I would say, not publicly, but we have some internal things right now with some other sports events. Our basketball is on CBS Sports Network. We're still working with them on that. And then we have an internal media team that we're doing a huge renovation in our building currently. We will have some live streams / things that are going to go on with that here in the next 18 months as well, that will probably enhance, viewership and the ability to do more outside of maybe TV. But we know that that's the importance of it. And I would agree with you, Mick, that the 4 teams that you mentioned, and there's many others. But what I love about the NIVC is our teams, 32 teams that we have this year, really bought into play. And that's the difference between just hand selecting the next 32, is that I can have healthy conversations with coaches and administrations about, does your team want to play on? Because we wanted to make sure it's great volleyball and not just have a team come in and play because they were quote unquote selected to play. We want to make sure that the momentum's right for their team. And that's, I think, what you see right now in the NIVC is some really good volleyball. I mean, I've been running it for now, 4 or 5 years. And I think this year, some of the matches that are being played and how hard the teams are playing and the grittiness, I think that says a lot about not only, this, I would say, about the 32 teams that are selected this year, even if they're not the next 32 that quote unquote should be in.
I feel the same way. I feel like the level of volleyball is increased at the lower end almost 100%. And the competition is what I've been watching. And I've been watching the non-Power 5 conferences. And they have 2 or 3 or 4 teams in those conferences. It would seem to me, and you may have tried to do this, but going and getting the conferences to support this by helping send their next team that was in line who didn't get in would be a way to support their volleyball programs in that conference. Like when I was in the Pac-12, we were taking all-star teams to China and things like that. But wouldn't it have been better to be able to play your next setter in this tournament or work on some things for the coming year, still in season, but at the end of the season while the NC2A tournament's going on? It just seems to me that somehow we have to pry out some TV coverage for this, and then all at once they see the benefit of getting in there.
I would agree with you. Yeah, 100%. Those are the innovative, creative thought process we have moving forward. We know that we have to potentially do something different, not only just TV. That's a huge financial. We're a family-owned company. This is. I tell people this all the time. All our other events that we run supports this event. Because this is not this is a revenue generator, but it's not a profit generator by any means. It's just giving back to the game of volleyball, So I would agree with you on that, Mick, that TV is a huge element. And I would agree with you also that conferences, we have worked with there's several conferences that are 100% bought in and supporting this. We've approached them like, is there each school, for example, could throw in $500, and then if you are the AQ, that you already have X amount of dollars put in towards, a second tier tournament, AKA the NIVC, right? And we've seen consistency with some conferences that do believe in the product and their teams. UNLV, for example, you look at Dawn and what she did at UNLV, she's now propelled to Missouri and, in the NCAA tournament in year 1, right? Those huge success story. You look at Georgia Tech and what they're currently doing, and in 19, they go on the road on the last game and beat South Dakota, and they should never sniff the NIVC ever again, but they put them on the map, not only for, coverage, but I think recruitability. That's the other thing that this event brings is right now, everyone's involved in volleyball, Twitter, or X, all the TV outlets, all social media. It's all surrounded about volleyball. And if my team is still playing, that's showing other kids that maybe are recruiting, that I'm recruiting that, hey, I'm played in postseason, and so there's other options there too that maybe aren't written on paper, right? It's not seen on TV that the coaches have told us this is the reason why we do it.
Well, it certainly helped Boston College last year. Jason Kennedy, the coach out there, came to your tournament. He won the tournament, I believe. And this year, for the first time, Boston College is over 500, finished above the middle of the pack, I believe, and had a great win at the end of the season. And I think the tournament just propelled his team to work harder in the spring and get ready for this fall's tournament. So I'm a big supporter of your tournament. I'd be happy to help in any way I could to try to get more attention to this, because I think these teams benefit and the coaches benefit, because in this kind of a tournament, you can play the next player up sometimes and get some really valuable experience. And I would have done that had I been in that situation.
Yeah, well, I agree with you, Mick. And whatever you can do, we'll utilize you as a resource and your knowledge, music coaching. But I would say, I agree with you on that. And just even outside of playing the next kid up or the training that you get, in a week or 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks of additional training, is that you also have to learn how to juggle, balance. Doing maybe your finals on the road, proctoring some exams and figuring out the school side of it, the academic side of it that currently, like, Clemson right now has been on the road forever and trying to juggle and figure out, hey, I got to take finals, I got to do this. And so if you are an NCAA team, hopefully the next year after the NIVC, that you are prepared for that, and your coaching staff is also prepared for that, right? To have to scout 3 teams that you don't know, or 2 teams you don't know who you're going to play next, so there's also coaching education that becomes a valuable resource by playing postseason volleyball. So
no question about that. Back to you, Daniel.
Yeah, great points. No, I appreciate the time, Jared. Thank you so much. Looking forward to seeing how this I was curious, one last one. Where did you come up with some of these names? You've got the Great 8 and the Fab 4 and the Super 16. Was that something that you came up with, or did you have?
Not me. That's our media team, which we're trying to enhance that. I know that as a high school coach here in Colorado, I know in the basketball side here in Colorado, they use some of that terminology, but it's not branded to. Obviously, we can't use like Elite 8, those sort of things. But yeah, those are just some things our media team's trying to evolve. Some excitement around it, so make it feel special.
I love it. Well, the action starts for the Great 8 on Wednesday night. We've got Wichita State, Drake, Montana State, Wyoming, UTEP, Clemson, and then USF and Georgia Southern on Thursday. Jared Rudiger, thank you so much for joining us. For Mick, he's Jared. I'm Daniel. This is 6 Rotations.